Hey guys, so today's video is going to be slightly different from my channel. I've never done one quite like this, but today we are confronting my Colourpop addiction. I love Colourpop and I love their eyeshadow formula so much. Their palettes are so affordable, and my collection of Colourpop palettes especially has grown exponentially over the past year or so. So today I'm here to talk myself out of buying the Through My Eyes palette, which I'll insert a picture right here, and then also the It's My Pleasure palette, I think it's called. Those are Colourpop's two newest palette releases, and while I think they are so stunning, I love them so much, I think they're beautiful, I don't need them. Even though I really want them, I don't need them. I've started project painting this year, and it's just really shown me that, you know what, makeup lasts a long time, so you gotta slow down on your buying so you can actually get to the stuff that you love and use it and get your money's worth out of it. So without further ado, let's hop into it. So I do just want to throw this little disclaimer in there for you guys just in case. I'm not saying you shouldn't buy these palettes, or if you did buy these palettes, how dare you. I'm just simply trying to shop my stash, use more of what I have, and kind of encourage you guys to do the same, because I feel like that's where a lot of us are moving. And I thought that this could be a really great resource for you guys. So the first palette I want to dupe is the Through My Eyes palette. You guys, this palette is so stunning. I've almost bought it like 3 times. I have nothing against I Love Sarah He or the color story of it. I think it's stunning, but I don't need it because I have these shades. So the first palette that I immediately thought of when I saw this palette was my Morphe Jaclyn Hill palette. I feel like this has a ton of similar tones. So I'm going to try to challenge myself to dupe it with only this palette, because I know a lot of you guys have this palette and I know the formula is amazing on these shadows. So the first shade in the palette is called Lucido, and it's kind of a soft, like, champagne-y gold shade. So the first shade that I went to is the shade Beam in the Jaclyn Hill palette, and that is that one right here. I think Beam may be a tad bit lighter, but honestly this palette, the Through My Eyes palette, was missing a kind of light inner corner highlight, brow bone highlight shade for me, and I think this one would work absolutely beautifully for that. It's not really picking up on camera, but it's definitely has more of a golden sheen to it. The next shade is the shade Wild Soul, and I think the shade Creamsicle from the Jaclyn Hill palette will dupe that absolutely perfectly. It's kind of a beautiful mustardy yellow shade. It's so stunning, you guys. This is one of the standout shades in the Through My Eyes palette that I was like, oh, I love that shade. I would love to create some looks with that shade. But I actually already own that shade in my collection, and it's grossly underused. So here's that shade next to Beam. So the next shade in the Through My Eyes palette is the shade Mesmerize, and this is a beautiful kind of coppery golden shade. So when I dipped into my Jaclyn Hill palette, I'm like, well, I feel like it's right in between these two shades. So I just mixed those two shades, and those were Firework and Queen. And here's what that looks like. I feel like that is pretty darn spot on, you guys. If you can't see the swatches that great right now, don't worry. I'm going to do a close-up at the end so you can see them nice up close and personal. So the next shade in the Through My Eyes palette is the shade Sandalwood, and this is just kind of a nice medium-toned warm brown. And to dupe that shade, I dipped into my Jaclyn Hill palette, and I dipped into the shade MFEO. So as you can tell, this is just a nice light-toned warm brown. This would probably be more of a transition-y shade on me, or kind of like a very light crease shade, but I think it's absolutely beautiful. Like, I love this little quad that we have going on right now. The next shade in the Through My Eyes palette is called In a Wink, and in the swatch it looks kind of peachy, but I feel like in the pan it looks like a very just kind of everyday matte vanilla shade. So unfortunately this was not in the Jaclyn Hill palette, but I know I have these a dime a dozen in my collection, so I just reached into my e.l.f. Matte for Matte 2 palette, and I reached into that very lightest matte shade right there. And I feel like that duped that really well. I feel like when you do these kind of duping palettes with your own stash videos, you can even customize the palette a little bit more to your taste. So let's say the shade in the actual Through My Eyes palette was just a little bit too deep for me to kind of set down my eye primer. I could dip into another shade in my dupe palette to make it a little bit more user-friendly for me and a little bit more valuable to my collection. So the next shade in the palette is called Euphoric, and it's this beautiful rich orangey shade, and I couldn't find that shade exactly in my Jaclyn Hill palette, so I actually reached into my Blush Tribe Blossom palette, and I dipped into the shade Carnation right here. And I feel like this one may be a bit more vibrant than Euphoric is in the Through My Eyes palette, but I still think it's absolutely beautiful. I think they would pair really beautifully with the other tones in this palette. The next shade in the palette is called Canela. I hope I'm saying that right. I took 2 years of Spanish in high school, but I feel like I learned nothing. But it's just kind of a beautiful medium warm brown shade, and to dupe that I once again dipped into my Jaclyn Hill palette, and I dipped into the shade Roxanne, which is right here. It's just a beautiful rich warm brown, and I think this one is spot on, you guys, if I do say so myself. I think it works beautifully with the rest of the tones in the palette. I think we're right on the money. So the next shade in the Through My Eyes palette is called Lomo. It's like a matte, vibrant, reddish pinky shade. And regrettably, I could not find that in my Jaclyn Hill palette, so I once again dipped into my Blush Tribe Blossom palette, and I decided to use the shade Rose. It looks quite like tomato red in the pan, but I find that when you swatch it and wear it on the eyes, it's definitely more reddish and a little bit pink. So there's that right there. Isn't that stunning, you guys? Oh, I love the color scheme so much. The next shade in the Through My Eyes palette is called Emerald Room. It is this beautiful metallic rich green shade. It's not really a hunter green, but it's not really a teal either. It's somewhere in the middle, and it is just, it's breathtaking, you guys. This is one of my favorite shades in the palette. So for that one, I was actually able to dip into the Jaclyn Hill palette, and I had to mix 2 shades. So I mixed the shade Pool Party and Diva right here. Pool Party is like your classic kind of bright teal shade, but Diva is more of a metallic, like jade kind of. It's so stunning, but mixed together, I think they give a very similar shade to what is in the Through My Eyes palette. The next shade in the Through My Eyes palette is the shade Muse with a Z. And this just looks like a beautiful, rich, kind of old gold bronzy shade. And I found that this one was very easy to dupe with the Jaclyn Hill palette. I just dipped into the shade Queen right here. This is one of the best golds I have in my collection, you guys. It is so creamy, so pigmented, just it blows me away every time I dip into it. So there's that shade. I had to kind of wipe off my arm because we were running out of space. So there's that shade right there. The next shade in the palette is the shade Divina, which is just a beautiful, really deep, dark kind of burgundy plummy tone with a little bit more red than like your average plummy tone, I would say. So this one was a little bit harder to dupe with the Jaclyn Hill palette, but I think I found a pretty close match, and I just did that by mixing the shades Roxanne, which is right here. It's this beautiful, beautiful burgundy tone, and then the shade Soda Pop right here, which is a beautiful matte purple shade. So the swatch looks a little patchy. It's just because I was having some issues kind of swatching them on top of each other, but both of these shadows reform beautifully on the eyes. They'll blend out really nicely and go on really, really pigmentedly. The next shade in the palette is called Flex, and it's kind of a beautiful metallic shimmery cool tone brown shade, and to do that I just dipped into the Jaclyn Hill and Morphe palette, and I dipped into the shade right here, which is called 24/7. I'm not sure if it's gonna pick up on camera, but this shade has beautiful like silver flecks of shimmer in it. It is so stunning, and I feel like I can especially tell in the photo I'm looking at right now of the Through My Eyes palette that shade has a very, very kind of similar shimmery effect. I look like I'm like strangling my arm, but I'm just trying to twist it so you guys can see the swatches. So the next shade in the palette is called Nostalgia, and it's just a beautiful, soft, kind of peachy shade. So to dupe that shade, I dipped into my Blush Tribe Blossom palette, and I actually dipped into the shade Zinnia right here. It's this beautiful kind of, it looks very coral in the pan, but it comes off very peach in a swatch. This is actually my favorite shade in this palette. I actually did a whole video a couple months ago where I picked out my favorite shades out of a couple different palettes in my collection. If you guys are interested, I will definitely link that below because that video was so much fun to do. But here is that in a swatch. Isn't that gorgeous? I love the color story of this palette, you guys. I know I've said it a lot of times, but that's what really attracts me to the palette. I mean, obviously Colourpop is super affordable and their shadow formula is amazing, but I love the color story. I love how different it is. I love how well thought out it is. The next shade in the palette is the shade Moody, and this is just a very deep, dark, matte green. So to dupe that, I dipped into the Jaclyn Hill palette, and I went in with the shade Enchanted right here. This is one of my favorite shades in this palette because it's so unique, it's so different, and it can create some really, really gorgeous depth in a look, but it can still look green. Like, you know, it's a stunning, stunning color, and I think they did a great job of formulating it. So there's that shade swatched along with the other shades. Next shade in the palette is the shade Nocturne, and to dupe this one, I dipped into my Jaclyn Hill palette, and I dipped into this shade right here, and I believe it's called Cran Apple. It's just a beautiful kind of metallic cranberry shade, and there it is swatched on my arm. The final shade in the palette is called Misbehave, and it's kind of a beautiful, super deep, dark matte red. So this one was very challenging to dupe, you guys. I'm not gonna lie, I thought I wasn't gonna be able to dupe it, but I just had to dip into 2 different palettes and mix some shades around. So the first shade that I dipped into is the shade Roxanne, once again from the Jaclyn Hill and Morphe palette. This is such a beautiful, like, kind of burgundy tone. It's not like super red, which is why I dipped into the Blush Tribe Blossom palette, and I dipped into that gorgeous rose shade again, you guys, and I just kind of mixed those 2 together in a swatch, and I feel like we nailed it pretty dead on. Alright guys, so I'm gonna throw up swatches of my dupe palette compared to the actual palette right here. I'll put my swatches over here, dupe palette over here, so you guys can kind of see and compare, but I think we did a really great job with the Through My Eyes palette. I knew that I could find a lot of the shades in my Jaclyn Hill palette. I feel like I find a ton of shades in here when I try to do palettes because it's so massive. But I feel like this has definitely kind of cured my wanting for that palette, so let's move on to the next palette. So guys, funny story about this video. So I filmed the first part of this video a couple days ago, and I just kind of took a break in between the palettes. I got up, I made dinner, and then like I was doing stuff around the house, and I kind of totally forgot that I was filming a video until I was like about to get in the shower. I'm like, wait, I don't want to wash my makeup off yet, but then I'm like, you know what, it's late, I need to get in bed, so we're finishing this video up today. So like I said, the second palette that I wanted to do was the Colourpop It's My Pleasure palette, which I'll insert a little picture right here for you guys. This palette has a really nice mix of kind of pinks and purples, and it does have a couple neutral tones. And while I think it is stunning, and I love the direction that Colourpop is going with this kind of palette, and their Ooh La La palette, I love these more focused color story palettes. I think that they're really onto something, and if they keep releasing these kind of palettes, they're gonna sell out like hotcakes. But for this one specifically, while I love the shade choice, I feel like I own these shades, you guys. So I'm gonna dig into my collection, see what we can find, and we'll hop into it. So unfortunately, unlike the Through My Eyes palette, I don't think this one is going to be mostly dupable with one palette. You guys even saw with that palette, I had to dip into a couple different palettes to get more of those brighter tones, but the majority of the palette I did find in my Jaclyn Hill palette. So for the It's My Pleasure palette, the first shade is called Kittenfish? Kittenfish. That's an interesting name. It's kind of like a pink with a little bit of a lilac twist to it. So for this one, I dipped into my Blush Tribe Blossom palette, and I simply mixed these shades. Lysianthus right there. I know I'm butchering these names, just bear with me, guys. And then the shade Peony right there, right over there. So here's the shade that I came up with on my arm. I think this is spot on. It's just kind of a soft pink with a hint of purple, and I think that is so stunning. Alright guys, so the next shade in the palette was called Do or Doe, which is so adorable. I love the shade name of that so much, and it's a really unique shade. It doesn't really look like it in the pan, but swatched out, you guys, this is so beautiful. So it's like a purple, but it's like a purple with a lot of warmth, and it looks like it has a lot of glitter in it. Now this one I had such a hard time trying to dupe, so I feel like I can't just buy the whole palette for one shade. That's ridiculous, right? Right, that's ridiculous. Don't talk me into that. So to kind of dupe it, I dipped into my Lorac Shine Bright palette. This was their holiday release last year. And I dipped into the shade Cosmic right here, which is just a beautiful kind of run-of-the-mill purple. And then I dipped into my She palette. Stay with me, this is a weird combination. And I dipped into the shade Gal right here, which is like a coppery shade with a pink shift. And here's what I came up with. I don't think it's spot on, but I think it could create a similar effect. This one I feel like was a teeny bit of a fail because I feel like that shade is really unique, but that's as close as we're gonna get, and like I said, I can't buy the whole palette for one shade. That's ridiculous. The next shade in the palette is called Pretty Cruel, and that's actually a single that Colourpop already has in their line, and I own the single, so this one's definitely a dupe. So there's that shade swatched right there. The next shade in the palette is called Bare Minimum, and this one is the most beautiful, like, berry magenta shimmery metallic shade. It is so stunning, you guys. And to dupe that, I dipped into the Lorac Shine Bright Pro palette once again, but this time I dipped into the shade right here, Royalty. How beautiful is that shade in the pan? Wait till you guys see it swatched out. So pretty, so pretty. And like with the other palette, I will do some close-ups at the end so you guys can see the shades a little bit better. The next shade in the palette is called Earthshine, and I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is this new single in their singles line. I don't know why they're putting so many like single shades that they already have in this palette. I would be a little like peeved if I had already bought that single, but I mean they fit really well with the color story, so anyways. So for this one, I actually took 2 shades. One of them, I know what it is, and then the other one is a mystery shade. I was gifted some singles from a friend on Instagram a couple months ago, and one of these came with her singles, and I think she like deposited it out of a palette or something, so I don't really know where it's from, but I do have something comparable to show you guys. So the one that I do know is the shade Gem, and this is from Looksy Beauty. So this is just a nice like soft pink. It is super duper shimmery, and then here's kind of the mystery shadow. It's more of a mid-tone pink. It has some cool tones to it. So here are what those two look like swatched on my arm. I feel like that looks very similar to Earthshine, but since we don't really know what the mystery single is, I did also kind of dip into my Bad Habit After Hours palette, and I found a similar shade. It's called Gossip. So this is also a dupe for the Huda Beauty Mauve Obsessions palette. So if you have that palette, you also have a similar shade. And I just kind of mixed those on my arm right there to create kind of a super shimmery mid-tone pink. The next shade in the palette is called Chicklet, and it's like a deep metallic purple. And for simplicity's sake, I'm going to dip into the Lorac Shine Bright Pro palette again, and I'm going to dip into the shade Cosmic right here. I also think that the purple in the Jaclyn Hill Morphe palette, the original one, would be perfect for this shade. But when I do these videos, I try not to bounce around between too many palettes because I know that just makes things a little more complicated for you guys when you're looking in your stash. So here's that shade swatched along with the other shades. I feel like the one in the palette may be just a teeny tiny bit more vibrant, but I think you could still get a very similar look with this shade. So the next shade in the palette is called Mr. Sandman, and Colourpop describes it as an icy rose with a silver sheen. That's the cutest thing you've ever seen. So this looks like it's also one of their new singles. So this one I had a little bit of difficulty duping, but I think I did okay. So I dipped into my She palette once again, and I just kind of mixed these shades Empress and Mademoiselle right here. I mixed these two together, and here's the result that I got. In the swatch, it looks very bronzy, so I don't really know where they're getting the icy, what do they say, icy pink? Icy rose. But all the swatches that I've seen of it make it look kind of bronzy, a little taupey. So I think based on the swatches that I've seen, this is a pretty accurate representation of that shade. So the next shade in the palette is called Fanfiction, and it's kind of a medium, like true pink, I would say. It's not like bam neon pink, but it's not like a magenta. So at first I dipped into my Blush Tribe Blossom palette, and I dipped into the shade Peony right here because that looks like a muted pink, but that one actually comes off a little bit brighter, a little bit more neon in a swatch. So then I dipped into my Bad Habit After Hours palette, and I just added a little bit of the shade Flushed right here over top, and I think we got us a winner, guys. So the last shade is called Sleeper, and it's also one that already exists in their single shadow range. Unfortunately, I do not own that exact single, but I do own the shades Going Steady and also Cute Alert. So Sleeper is described on the Colourpop website as a deep eggplant shade, so I feel like if I mix those two together, that should be pretty darn close. I feel like Going Steady is a little bit too light, but the other one, I forgot what it was called already, is a little bit too deep. So here's what we came up with. You guys, I am shocked by how close I got to this palette. I really thought that this video was gonna kind of talk me out of it, but I'm glad that it didn't because there are quite a few other things from Colourpop that I would like to try. Yes, I still am addicted to Colourpop, but I'm glad that I can spend my money elsewhere because now I feel like, hey, I have these shades, I can create similar looks, I don't need to buy that palette. I'm gonna watch this video when I want to buy that palette because it's on sale. Make sure to leave me down below what you guys kind of shopped your stash for, what palettes you dipped into. Do you like to shop your stash like this, or would you rather just buy the palette? Let me know in the comments down below. I would love to know. And oh, before I forget, I will insert a close-up picture of the swatches of the palette that we came up with versus the original palette so you guys can kind of compare them. And that's actually gonna wrap up this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more Shop My Stash videos from me. These videos are kind of inspired by Kelly Gooch. She does kind of a similar series on her channel, so I'll link her channel as well as her videos down below. And yeah, thank you once again for hanging out with me, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye!